The moment my wife handed me divorce papers, she wasn't trying to end our marriage. She was trying to keep my paycheck. And when she smiled across the dinner table and told me she still expected $3,000 to hit her bank account on the first of every month, she honestly believed I'd say yes. Tuesday nights had always been my night to cook. It was one of those routines that had survived 11 years of marriage. No matter how exhausting work became, no matter how many double shifts I pulled at the hospital, Tuesday meant I came home, tied on an apron, and made dinner. That night it was chicken casserole. Nothing fancy. Just something warm after another 12-hour shift. The house smelled like melted cheese and roasted garlic. The oven was still ticking as it cooled. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. At least, I thought it did. Nain walked into the kitchen carrying a plain manila envelope. No smile. No greeting. No kiss. She simply placed the envelope on the table, right between the salt shaker and the casserole dish I'd spent the last hour making. Open it. Her voice was flat. Almost bored. I laughed a little. What is it? Just open it. I pulled the flap apart. The first page was enough to make my stomach drop. Divorce papers. Already completed. Already signed. Only one signature was missing. Mine. I flipped through the pages with numb fingers until a bright yellow sticky note caught my eye. Written in neat handwriting were 4 words. Sign here, smiley face. With a smiley face. A smiley face. I looked up. Nain hadn't even stopped eating. She scooped another bite of casserole onto her fork, chewing slowly while scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't just detonated 11 years of our lives. Finally, without looking at me, she said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Silence. I need a better man. Each word landed harder than the last. You aren't it. My throat tightened. The room suddenly felt much smaller. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than it ever had before. I searched her face for anything. Regret. Sadness. Guilt. Anything. There was nothing. Just the glow of her phone reflecting in her eyes. Then came the sentence that made my hands go completely numb. I still expect the same amount in my account every month. I blinked. What? The 3,000. She finally looked at me. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I've gotten used to that lifestyle. She shrugged. Divorce doesn't change that. For a second, I honestly wondered if I'd heard her wrong. $3,000. Every month. After divorcing me. She spoke about it the same way someone reminds you to pay the electric bill. Matter of fact. Expected. Automatic. I stared at her. She stared back. Waiting. As if my answer had already been decided. If you'd asked me that morning whether my wife loved me, I would have said yes without hesitation. Looking back now, I don't know if she loved me. Or just loved the life I paid for. Nain hadn't worked in 9 years. 2 years into our marriage she came home from her insurance office job exhausted. She threw her purse onto the couch and sighed dramatically. I can't do this anymore. What happened? My job drains me. She said it like she'd been carrying a mountain on her shoulders. I need time to figure out what I actually want to do. I remember reaching across the table and squeezing her hand. If quitting helps, then quit. She smiled. Wrapped her arms around me. Told me I was the most supportive husband in the world. At the time, that hug felt priceless. I didn't realize it'd eventually cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. Weeks became months. Months became years. Every now and then I'd casually ask, so, have you thought about going back to work? She'd smile. I'm still figuring things out. Then she'd kiss my cheek. And somehow the conversation would disappear. Eventually, I stopped asking. Because saying yes to Nain became easier than arguing. She wanted to redecorate the guest room. Okay. 6 months later she hated the colors. Okay. She wanted to redo it again. Okay. She wanted expensive wine delivered every month. Okay. Yoga classes. Okay. Pottery classes. Okay. A photography course that cost $800. Okay. She bought an expensive camera. Took exactly 3 blurry pictures. Then forgot photography existed. Okay. Somewhere along the way. Okay stopped being a word. It became my personality. While she searched for herself, I worked. Radiology technician. Hospital shifts that started before sunrise. 12 hours. Sometimes 16. I watched people on the worst days of their lives while wondering if I had enough energy left to mow the lawn before collapsing into bed. Every paycheck already had a destination. Mortgage. Utilities. Insurance. Groceries. Her car. Her phone. Her credit cards. Streaming subscriptions she'd forgotten she even had. Hair appointments. Shopping. Wine club. Gym membership she almost never used. And every first of the month, $3,000. Transferred directly into her personal account. She called it her independence fund. The irony would have been funny if I hadn't been paying for it. The more I thought about it sitting at that dinner table, the more memories surfaced. Like puzzle pieces finally fitting together. Every Saturday she'd meet her friends for brunch. Every vacation had to be somewhere she'd picked. Every holiday revolved around what she wanted. If I ever suggested staying home because work had been rough, she'd sigh dramatically. You never want to do anything. Never once. Not once. Did she ask how I was holding up after another week of double shifts? She knew exactly what time I left every morning. 5 o'clock. Alarm. Coffee. Shower. Hospital. Repeat. For 10 years. Yet I couldn't remember a single morning she looked at me and asked, "Are you tired?" Back at the table, I finally managed to speak. "Why now?" She set her fork down. Folded her arms. Almost like she'd practiced this speech. "You work too much." Each reason came out like a bullet point. "You're boring." Pause. "We never travel enough." Pause. "You've let yourself go." That one almost made me laugh. I weighed exactly what I'd weighed on our wedding day. The only thing that had changed was the exhaustion behind my eyes. The exhaustion that came from funding 2 lives. She kept talking. "I deserve better." There it was again. Deserve. Such a small word. Such an expensive one. I looked around the dining room. The house I'd bought before we were married. The table I'd assembled myself. The dinner I'd cooked. The electricity I paid for. The groceries I bought. Everything she could see existed because I'd worked for it. And somehow, she still believed she deserved more. I asked one final question. "What are you planning to do after the divorce?" She tilted her head. Confused. Like I'd asked why the sky was blue. "The 3,000. She smiled. "That's what it's for." I stared. She continued. "I've gotten used to a certain lifestyle. It wouldn't be fair for you to cut me off. Not, I'll get a job. Not, I'll figure something out. Just, it wouldn't be fair." Fair. I almost choked on the word. I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. Didn't argue. I simply closed the folder. "I'll read everything." She shrugged. Picked up her plate. Walked into the living room. Turned on one of the 6 streaming services I paid for. Within seconds, I could hear a sitcom laughing through the walls. Our marriage had just ended. And she was already watching television. I couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. So I walked into the garage. The air smelled like gasoline and fresh cut grass. The lawn mower sat exactly where I'd left it after mowing the yard that weekend. Nain always claimed she couldn't help because grass gave her allergies. Funny. Those allergies never stopped her from spending entire Saturdays at outdoor brunch patios. I sat down on an upside-down bucket, pulled out my phone, and called the only person I trusted to tell me the truth. My older brother, Niall. He answered on the second ring. "You okay?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Then, everything did. I told him about the envelope. The smiley face. The casserole. The $3,000. I need a better man. The way she'd never stopped eating. The way she'd looked at me like I was an ATM asking too many questions. When I finished, there was silence. 10 long seconds. Finally, Niall spoke. "One question. Just one. Is your name on everything?" I frowned. "What? The house?" "Yes." "The cars?" "Mine." "The accounts?" "Mostly." Another pause. Then he said the sentence that quietly changed my life. "Good." The next morning, instead of begging my wife to stay, I walked into a divorce attorney's office. And within 30 minutes, I realized Nain had made one mistake she never saw coming. She thought the man who always said, "Okay," would say it one last time. The next morning, I didn't wake up feeling angry. I woke up feeling empty. Not the kind of empty that comes after losing someone. The kind that comes after realizing you'd been carrying a weight for so long that you forgot what standing up straight felt like. The house was unusually quiet. No television humming from the living room. No coffee mug abandoned on the kitchen counter. No voice calling my name before I'd even finished brushing my teeth. Just silence. Real silence. For the first time in years, I noticed it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I stood in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Across the room sat the same dining table. The same chair. The same place where a yellow sticky note with a smiley face had turned 11 years of marriage into a business transaction. I expected to feel pain looking at it. Instead, I felt clarity. Funny how heartbreak works. At first it clouds everything. Then one day, It becomes the very thing that lets you see clearly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Hello? Mr. Carter? Speaking. This is Melissa from Henderson Legal. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding your wife's filing. My wife. Those words already sounded strange. As if they belonged to someone else's life. I'll be there. The attorney's office smelled like polished wood and fresh paper. Neat. Organized. Nothing like the emotional mess waiting inside me. Melissa greeted me with a calm smile. I've reviewed the documents. She folded her hands. Before we discuss strategy, I need to ask you something. I nodded. Have you been making financial decisions under pressure? I frowned. What do you mean? She slid a legal pad toward me. Over the last decade, how many major expenses were made because your wife insisted on them? I opened my mouth. Then stopped. I started counting. The luxury SUV. The designer furniture. The kitchen remodel. The European vacation that nearly emptied our savings. Private club memberships. Spa packages. Weekend shopping trips. Every answer felt heavier than the last. Melissa quietly kept writing. When I finished, she looked at me. You've spent years confusing generosity with obligation. That sentence hit harder than anything Nain had said. Because it was true. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio. Instead, I replayed little moments. Moments I'd ignored. Like the night I'd come home after working 16 hours straight. My back ached. My feet were blistered. I barely had enough energy to stand. Nain hadn't asked how work went. She looked up from her tablet and said, "Did you remember to order those patio chairs?" I apologized. She sighed. Rolled her eyes. Then told me I was becoming forgetful. At the time, I believed her. Now, I realized something. Exhaustion wasn't my flaw. It was the price I paid for keeping someone else's comfort alive. Over the next week, I started opening drawers I'd ignored for years. Not because I was searching for evidence. Because I was trying to understand the life I'd been living. Receipts. Stacks of them. Designer stores. Boutiques. Luxury cosmetics. Random online purchases I'd never seen. One receipt caught my attention. A handbag. Nearly $2,000. I remembered that month. I'd skipped replacing my worn-out work shoes because money was tight. I'd convinced myself they could last another year. Meanwhile, I'd unknowingly bought someone a purse worth more than 3 months of groceries. I sat on the floor holding that receipt for a long time. Not because of the money. Because I'd accepted that my needs always came second. People started calling. Friends. Neighbors. People I hadn't spoken to in months. Every conversation felt strangely similar. I heard things didn't end well. I'm sorry you're both going through this. Marriage is complicated. Nobody asked what actually happened. They'd already heard a version. Just not mine. One evening my coworker David walked into the break room carrying 2 coffees. He handed one to me. You okay? I shrugged. As okay as someone signing divorce papers can be. He hesitated. My wife talked to yours. I looked up. What did she say? David rubbed the back of his neck. She told everyone you've become controlling. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Controlling? I'd spent 11 years agreeing with almost everything she wanted. If anything, my biggest mistake was never saying no. That night I stood in the garage again. Same bucket. Same lawn mower. Same smell of gasoline. Different man. Niall pulled into the driveway carrying pizza. He looked at me for a few seconds. You've lost weight. I've lost stress. He laughed. That's usually lighter. We sat on the driveway eating straight from the box. No plates. No expectations. Just brothers. You know what bothers me? I asked. What? I keep wondering when she stopped loving me. Niall didn't answer immediately. Finally he spoke. Maybe you're asking the wrong question. I looked over. What question should I ask? When did you stop loving yourself enough to notice? I stared into the darkness. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once. Then everything fell silent again. His words echoed longer than the bark. Over the following month, little changes started happening. I cooked dinner because I wanted to. Not because it was expected. I started going for evening walks. I slept 8 hours for the first time in years. I smiled at strangers. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in a grocery store window. I looked older. Still tired. But there was something else. Hope. Small. Fragile. But there. Then, everything changed. I received a notification from the bank. Someone had attempted to access one of my old joint accounts. The account we'd agreed would remain frozen until the divorce was finalized. The login failed. Twice. Then succeeded. My heart started pounding. I immediately called the bank. After 20 anxious minutes, the representative confirmed something that made my blood run cold. The account hadn't been hacked. Someone had used the correct password. Someone who already knew it. Nain. I drove straight to my attorney's office. Melissa listened carefully before requesting the account records. Within an hour, she looked up from her computer. Her expression had changed. What? She turned the monitor toward me. There were more attempts. I frowned. What does that mean? She folded her arms. It means your wife isn't just asking for money anymore. A knot tightened in my stomach. She's looking for something. What? Melissa's eyes met mine. I don't know yet. She clicked open another document. But whatever it is. She paused. She was willing to risk violating a court agreement to find it. That night? I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded louder. Every memory felt suspicious. Every conversation replayed differently. Then one thought landed harder than all the others. What if the marriage I'd been trying to save had been over long before that Tuesday dinner? And what if the divorce papers weren't the beginning of her plan? What if they were the final step? I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. Because for the first time, I wasn't wondering how to save my marriage. I was wondering what else I didn't know. People think closure arrives with a judge's signature. It doesn't. Sometimes, it arrives in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. Almost 3 months had passed since the bank incident. Melissa's investigation uncovered something neither of us expected. Nain hadn't been searching for forgotten savings. She'd been looking for an investment portfolio my father had started years before he passed away. The account wasn't even connected to our marriage. It had always belonged to me alone. But she knew it existed. And somewhere along the way, she convinced herself she deserved that too. When the court reviewed the bank records, her attorney argued it had been an innocent mistake. The judge didn't seem convinced. Attempting to access assets that were clearly outside the divorce agreement didn't help her case. For the first time, I watched confidence disappear from her face. Not because she'd lost money. Because she realized something far more unsettling. The man sitting across the courtroom wasn't the husband she'd spent 11 years controlling. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. There were no dramatic speeches. Just people walking to their cars. Life moving on. Nain called my name. I stopped. She walked toward me slowly. She looked different. Not because she'd changed physically. Because certainty had left her. I just want to talk. I sighed. We've talked enough. You owe me that. I almost smiled. No. She folded her arms. So that's it? I nodded. That's it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars rolled through the parking lot. A cold breeze carried dried leaves across the pavement. Then she asked something I never expected. Were you ever happy? The question hung between us. I thought about our wedding. The first apartment. Late-night pizza on the living room floor before we owned furniture. Weekend road trips in an old car with broken air conditioning. There had been happiness. Real happiness. Before comfort became entitlement. Before appreciation turned into expectation. I was. She looked relieved. Then I finished. Until I realized I was the only one building our life. Her eyes dropped. I got into my truck. And drove away. Weeks passed. Autumn slowly replaced summer. The trees lining my neighborhood turned shades of amber and gold. For the first time in years, I noticed them. Funny how you miss entire seasons when you're too busy surviving. My evenings looked completely different now. I cooked because I enjoyed it. Sometimes I experimented with recipes. Sometimes I burned them. Nobody complained. Nobody criticized. Nobody expected anything. Peace isn't exciting. It doesn't make headlines. But after years of emotional exhaustion, peace feels like winning the lottery. Niall visited every other weekend. One Saturday he walked through the front door carrying 2 fishing rods. When's the last time you went fishing? I laughed. I honestly don't remember. Exactly. We drove 2 hours to a quiet lake neither of us had visited since we were teenagers. The water barely moved. Neither did we. For almost an hour, we sat without saying a word. Eventually he looked over. You know what's different? What? You smile with your eyes again. I hadn't even noticed. A month later, something unexpected happened. I received a handwritten letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. It was from Nain. No accusations. No demands. No lawyers. Just paper. The handwriting looked familiar. Inside were only 3 paragraphs. She admitted she had spent years believing comfort was something she deserved instead of something someone sacrificed to provide. She admitted she'd confused generosity with weakness. She admitted she hadn't realized what I'd carried until she had to carry her own life. At the bottom, she wrote one sentence. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand. I read it twice. Then folded it carefully. Not because I wanted to keep it forever. Because some chapters deserve to end quietly. I placed it in a drawer. Closed it. And never opened it again. Winter arrived. So did promotions at work. Without constantly worrying about someone else's spending habits, I finally accepted additional certifications I'd been putting off for years. The raise wasn't life-changing. But the confidence was. I opened my first retirement account. Started investing regularly. Replaced the work shoes I'd worn until the soles nearly separated. Bought a decent mattress. Little things. Things I'd convinced myself could always wait. Turns out, I had always been the person waiting. One evening, I walked through the local grocery store after work. Someone called my name. I turned. Nain. She wore a dental office uniform. Name tag clipped neatly to her shirt. She looked tired. The kind of tired I'd known for years. She smiled politely. How've you been? Good. You? She nodded. I'm figuring things out. This time, I believed her. Not because she'd changed overnight. Because life had finally become her teacher instead of mine. She glanced at the shopping cart. Fresh vegetables. Steak. Flowers. For someone? She asked. I smiled. For me. She laughed softly. I guess you finally learned. I did. She hesitated. I really was awful sometimes, wasn't I? There was a version of me that would have rushed to make her feel better. The old me would have said, no, it wasn't all your fault. But honesty doesn't have to be cruel. It wasn't just sometimes. She closed her eyes briefly. Then nodded. I know. That was enough. Neither of us needed anything else. We wished each other well. Walked in opposite directions. And for the first time, it felt natural. The following spring, I hosted a barbecue. Nothing extravagant. Just family. Friends. Laughter filling a backyard that had once felt painfully empty. At one point, David raised a bottle and grinned. To new beginnings. Everyone cheered. Niall looked across the yard at me. You know what's funny? What? This house finally feels like yours. I looked around. Fresh paint. Flowers growing along the fence. Music playing softly. People genuinely happy to be there. He was right. It finally did. That night, after everyone left, I carried a plate into the kitchen. As I wiped down the counter, my eyes drifted toward the dining table. The same table. The same wood grain. The same place where my marriage had ended. I rested my hand on its surface. Funny. I used to think that table represented betrayal. Now, it represented something completely different. The day I stopped begging to be chosen. The day I started choosing myself. People always ask if I hate Nain. The answer surprises them. I don't. Hatred keeps people connected. And I spent enough years connected to someone who only saw me as what I could provide. I don't hate her. I hope she builds a life she's proud of. One she earns. One she appreciates. Because maybe then, she'll understand the value of the things she once treated as ordinary. As for me, I still cook every Tuesday. Not because it's tradition anymore. Because it reminds me that some routines are worth keeping. Just not the ones that cost you yourself. If there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's this. Love should make your life bigger. Not smaller. It should make you feel seen. Not simply useful. And if you ever find yourself giving everything while someone else keeps asking for more, don't wait 11 years to ask the hardest question. Who's taking care of me? Because the day you finally answer that question might just be the day your real life begins.